All the housekeepers fled the millionaire's home, despite earning a handsome salary. One day, the millionaire decided to set up a hidden camera, and a few days later, when he reviewed the recordings, he was completely shattered. What is it about this house that seems to devour those who dare to work here? The question echoed in Eugenio's mind as he stared into the emptiness of his mansion, where the silence grew heavy, as if each corner held secrets on the verge of exploding. From the outside, his home was an architectural masterpiece, with impeccable gardens and windows that captured sunlight at perfect angles. But inside, something disturbing lurked in the shadows. The seventh employee had just resigned, and, like all the others before, she left without a single explanation, leaving behind an aura of mystery and a troubling silence that grew heavier with each departure. Eugenio was not a man to be swayed by superstition. His life was marked by logic and planning. That's how he had built his fortune. But the constant resignations, his employees' silence, and the rumors that seemed to slip through the walls of his own home had him on the edge of obsession. The final straw was the expression of the last employee as she left. She tried to force a smile, but her eyes were filled with an inexplicable terror, as if she had just escaped something inhuman. Determined to uncover what was happening, Eugenio made a drastic decision. He ordered hidden cameras to be installed in every corner of the house, even in places his own family wouldn't know about. Watching the technicians discreetly place the devices in lamps, paintings, and strategic corners, Eugenio felt a mix of nervousness and relief. Finally, he would be able to see what happened when he wasn't there, what might have been right under his nose. That night, when everyone was asleep and the mansion was completely silent, Eugenio turned on his computer and started reviewing the recordings from the first day. There was nothing unusual, just employees cleaning in silence, maintaining the perfection of his home. But then, in a flash, he noticed something peculiar. Irene, his wife, was walking by, spitting and belittling one of the employees without even looking at her. Her face was tense, her gestures full of barely contained contempt. She walked over her as if she were a ghost drifting through the hallways. Although Eugenio was used to Irene's distant nature, this absolute coldness sent a shiver down his spine. It was as if, in that recording, she wasn't the woman he had known. The next morning, Eugenio tried to talk to Irene. As she had breakfast alone in the dining room, with a coffee and a meticulously sliced fruit plate, he approached, trying to start a conversation. "Do you know why you think the maids leave so often?" he asked in a seemingly casual tone. Irene looked up from her coffee, barely showing interest. "I have no idea. Maybe they can't stand living in the shadow of our perfect life," she replied with a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. "If they don't have enough strength to stay here, it's none of our business, is it?" Eugenio felt a pang of discomfort at her indifferent words. He knew that Irene had always been somewhat unique. But this time, her response held something more, a silent cruelty that unsettled him. Over the following days, Eugenio meticulously reviewed each recording. What he discovered plunged him into deep confusion. On several occasions, Irene treated the maids coldly, as if they were mere objects. She didn't raise her voice, didn't directly insult them, but her gestures and the way she looked at them were devastating. The scornful indifference and sarcastic remarks seemed to slowly poison the atmosphere. However, what impacted him most was how she ignored Mario, their 7-year-old son. In one recording, Mario was trying to get Irene's attention while she was in the living room, flipping through fashion magazines. The boy was showing her a drawing he had made at school, a drawing he had obviously done with dedication and affection. Irene didn't even look up. "Mom, do you like my drawing?" Mario asked shyly, his little voice trembling. Irene gave a slight nod and, without looking at him, muttered, "Sure, Mario, it's nice, or whatever." Mario, holding the paper and the disappointment evident in his eyes, slowly walked away, shoulders slumping as if his little world was falling apart. Eugenio felt a lump in his throat watching that scene. Although he was aware of the distance between Irene and Mario, he had never imagined it would go that far. Mario was a sensitive child, one of those little ones who seek love in every look and word. Eugenio had always tried to make up for that lack of affection with his own love, but he felt helpless against Irene's coldness. That same night, he decided to talk to Mario. He found him in his room, absorbed in one of his adventure books. "Mario," he said softly, entering and sitting beside him, "do you want to talk about something? How are you feeling?" Mario looked at him, as if not understanding the question at first, and then, after an uncomfortable silence, whispered, "Dad, sometimes I feel like Mom doesn't see me. Like I'm invisible to her." The child's words pierced Eugenio like a dagger. He hugged him and promised, in a low voice, that he would do whatever was necessary to make things better. Amid the somber atmosphere, Eugenio made a definitive decision. He needed someone new, someone capable of bringing warmth back into his home. He began searching for a new employee, someone willing to face the challenges of working in that house that, for some dark reason, seemed to devour souls. That was when Kelsey came into his life, a young woman freshly graduated who arrived the day after the last employee had left. The interview with Kelsey was brief. Eugenio noticed a spark of vitality in her, a shine in her eyes he rarely saw in others. Her profile was unusual. She had no experience in high-status places, but her honesty and simplicity seemed to bring fresh air to the mansion. Despite her youth, she appeared willing to work hard. Desperate for a change, Eugenio hired her immediately. That first night, Eugenio observed Kelsey from the cameras. She moved softly, trying not to disturb anything, yet with innocent curiosity in her gaze. The cameras captured every movement, every gesture as she adjusted to the environment that had been oppressive for many. In the middle of the night, he heard a sound from one of the rooms and saw Mario, who had woken from a nightmare and was walking through the halls looking for comfort. Eugenio was alarmed to see that Irene didn't wake to his cries, nor did she move to tend to him. But Kelsey did. The young woman found him in the hallway and, without hesitation, hugged him, soothing him with gentle words, as if her heart had felt the boy's pain. "Everything will be fine, Mario. I'm here with you," she said, as the child rested in her arms. Watching the scene, Eugenio felt a mixture of gratitude and relief. For the first time, someone was caring for his son with genuine tenderness. A spark of hope grew in him, but at the same time, the mystery deepened. Would Kelsey be able to handle what other employees hadn't endured? Would she withstand the darkness of this house that seemed to consume the souls of all who entered? As he turned off the computer that night, Eugenio gazed at the mansion in the shadows. He didn't know if he had found a solution or simply added another piece to the puzzle. But one thing was certain. With Kelsey in the house, silence would never be the same, and perhaps, finally, the secrets would begin to unfold. The walls of this house don't keep secrets. They spit them out in silence, tearing apart those who hear them. The thought lingered in Kelsey's mind as she walked through the mansion for the first time. She had taken the job out of the need for stability, but the place, though luxurious, radiated a strange atmosphere, as if an intangible weight floated in the air. There wasn't a trace of disorder, not a speck of dust. It was perfect, too perfect, to the point of feeling artificial, almost inhuman. Eugenio showed her the kitchen, the living room, and finally assigned her a room in one of the quieter wings of the house. He didn't say much, as if the mansion's atmosphere kept words confined within its walls. Grateful for the opportunity, Kelsey listened intently, absorbing every instruction. In those early days, Kelsey noticed the loneliness of Mario, a sad-eyed child who wandered through the house like a ghost, observing his surroundings with a premature sense of nostalgia. One day, while she was cleaning the living room, she saw him enter shyly. Mario held a toy, a small action figure that seemed to be his only companion. "Do you like heroes?" Kelsey asked with a smile meant to break the ice. Mario nodded, looking away as if he feared a single word could attract trouble. "I like heroes, but Mom says heroes don't exist," Mario replied in a low voice. Kelsey felt a pang of sadness upon hearing that but didn't want the child to notice. Instead, she gently said, "You know, I think heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they're just regular people who do special things." Mario looked at her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, but his eyes shone with what Kelsey interpreted as hope, a spark she wasn't willing to let die. She wanted him to know that someone in this house saw his worth. Shortly afterward, Irene appeared in the room. Her presence was elegant but cold. The air grew heavy with her arrival. Irene barely glanced at Kelsey, as if she were merely an extension of the furniture. However, upon seeing Mario speaking with the new employee, the coldness on her face turned into a look of disdain. "Mario, what are you doing here?" Irene asked, her voice icy. Mario, who had begun to relax with Kelsey, immediately straightened and lowered his gaze. Without a word, he left the room, leaving Kelsey and Irene alone. The atmosphere became dense, as if Irene's shadow absorbed the light. "I hope you're not distracting the child," Irene commented, not even trying to hide the severity in her voice. Kelsey, a bit nervous, tried to keep her composure. She knew her position in the house depended on keeping peace with the lady of the house. "We were just talking about heroes. Mario seems interested in that sort of thing." Irene let out a sarcastic laugh. "Mario needs fewer heroes and more reality. That boy is far too spoiled," she replied, cutting, as if every word carried a judgment. Kelsey didn't say anything else, but she felt the weight of those words and began to understand why the boy seemed so withdrawn. When Irene left the room, Kelsey stood still for a few seconds, processing the woman's coldness. She decided that, even if it wasn't allowed, she would do everything possible to give Mario some affection and hope. That night, as Eugenio reviewed the recordings from his study, he noticed something that unsettled him deeply. He watched the interaction between Irene and Mario in the living room and felt how his wife's coldness was affecting his son in a devastating way. Every comment, every absent look seemed to push Mario further and further into a dark zone of insecurity. Eugenio paused for a moment in silence, watching the footage without blinking, feeling a mix of anger and despair. It wasn't the first time he had noticed this treatment, but Mario's resignation struck him deeply. The next morning, Eugenio found Mario in the kitchen, eating breakfast alone. He sat beside him and gently ran his hand through his hair, a gesture full of affection. "Mario, I want you to know that you can talk to me whenever you need anything, okay?" Mario nodded silently, but his response didn't carry the conviction of someone who truly feels supported. Eugenio felt the weight of that response. He didn't know how, but he had to change things. Meanwhile, Kelsey was beginning to sense something more in the house. It wasn't just Irene's coldness or Mario's sadness. There was something in Eugenio's demeanor that betrayed a growing tension. His gaze, though kind, always seemed clouded by silent worry. One evening, as she put away the dishes in the kitchen, she found him absorbed in his thoughts, leaning against the doorframe. "Everything okay, Mr. Eugenio?" she asked timidly. Eugenio looked up and forced a smile, but his eyes showed no joy. "Sometimes I wonder if this house has the ability to make anyone happy," he murmured, almost to himself, as if he momentarily forgot that Kelsey was there. Kelsey felt a pang of compassion but stayed silent. She could see that, beneath the facade of success, Eugenio was also a victim of the shadows that seemed to dwell within the mansion. That same night, while reviewing a recording, Eugenio observed a scene that gave him a feeling of mixed relief and anguish. Kelsey, who had heard Mario crying, entered his room and sat beside him on the bed. With a maternal calm rarely seen in this house, she held him and began to sing a soft song to soothe him. "You're very brave, Mario. You don't need to prove to anyone how amazing you are," she whispered, as the boy began to drift off to sleep. Seeing that image, Eugenio felt his heart clench. Mario had found comfort that his own mother didn't provide, and although that gave him some peace, it also ignited an uncontrollable anger toward Irene. He wondered how long his son had been suffering in silence without him doing anything about it. That same early morning, Eugenio got up determined to confront Irene. He found her in her room, flipping through an interior design book. Seeing him, Irene gave him an impatient look. "What's wrong?" she asked, without raising her voice much, but with that coldness that had become part of her being. Eugenio looked at her, his words held back, his frustration on the brink of exploding. "Why do you act this way with Mario? He's your son, Irene, your own son. Don't you care about what he feels? Irene looked at him without any emotion, almost as if she found it tedious to have this conversation. She closed her book and responded with a tone almost mocking. Mario is far too sensitive. If he keeps this up, he won't achieve anything in life. What do you want me to do? Pamper him? It doesn't make sense. That boy needs to learn to be strong. Irene's words cut through Eugenio like a knife. He stared at her, trying to find some sign of remorse in her face, but he found only coldness. You have no idea the harm you're causing him, Eugenio said, with a mix of fury and sadness. If you can't see that he needs love, then I don't know what we're doing here. Irene simply shrugged, and without saying another word, turned back to her book, as if the conversation had meant nothing. Eugenio left the room, anger rumbling in his mind, feeling he had reached the limits of his patience. In the days that followed, Kelsey's presence in the house began to fill small voids, small moments of silence that had once seemed to absorb life. Mario smiled more, and though his sadness didn't disappear entirely, Kelsey managed to make him feel valued and loved. Eugenio watched everything from the recordings, his heart torn between gratitude and fury. The tension in the mansion grew more palpable. Irene seemed to notice the change in atmosphere, and her disdain toward Kelsey became increasingly evident. It was as if her coldness toward Mario now extended to the young woman, as if she sensed Kelsey had filled the space she herself had left vacant. One night, while Mario and Kelsey were in the kitchen, Irene appeared without warning. Her voice was soft, but laden with venom. "Kelsey, I hope you don't forget your place in this house," she said, casting a cold look at Mario. "Because here, things are not always what they seem." Kelsey, aware of the tension, looked at Irene with measured respect and unexpected firmness. "I know, Mrs. Irene, but some things are exactly as they should be," she replied, undeterred. Watching the scene on his screen, Eugenio felt something inside him break. The battle in his home had only begun, and the question that now tormented him was how far Irene would go to impose her coldness in a house that, thanks to Kelsey, seemed to be waking from a dark slumber. The shadows continued to linger, and Eugenio was beginning to realize that Kelsey's arrival had not only brought comfort, it had also exposed the hidden cracks in the heart of his own family. Eugenio, with a weight in his heart that seemed to grow each day, continued reviewing the recordings from the house every night, increasingly convinced that something was slowly breaking within his family. The recordings had already revealed Irene's disdainful treatment toward the staff and her utter indifference toward Mario. Yet, with each new scene captured, it was as if another layer of that contempt emerged, a contempt so silent and calculated that his wife's words echoed in his mind long after he heard them. On the screen, Irene appeared in the kitchen, where she found Kelsey arranging the pantry and immediately directed a look of disdain toward her. Her voice, barely a whisper, dripped with venom. "Why are you touching that?" she asked, almost without looking at her. "I hope you understand that you are not here to rearrange things as you please." Kelsey, trying to stay calm, responded politely. "Sorry, Mrs. Irene. I was just organizing things to make them easier to find." Irene let out a mocking laugh. "Of course, easier. I suppose that makes you feel important, doesn't it? Like you're someone in this house." Eugenio clenched his fists as he watched. Despite Kelsey's kindness, Irene insisted on attacking her with icy contempt. The video continued, showing how Kelsey, even in the face of constant humiliation, carried out her work with dignity. The young woman never reacted to the hurtful comments, and although Eugenio could see the impact of Irene's words on her face, she never let the situation overwhelm her. That night, after turning off the computer, Eugenio sat in silence in his study, trying to understand how things had come to this point. The recordings didn't just reveal Irene's cruel treatment of the staff, they also exposed the truth he had tried to ignore, the emotional chasm in his marriage and the distance he had allowed to grow between Irene and their son. The next morning, Eugenio found himself alone with Kelsey in the kitchen. Mario had gone out to the garden, and the morning light filtered softly through the window, creating an unexpected intimacy. Eugenio decided it was time to approach her and thank her for what she was doing for his son. Kelsey, I've seen how you care for Mario. I really appreciate what you're doing for him. It's clear that you're someone special to him, he said, unable to hide the sincerity in his tone. Kelsey, surprised, looked down, but her voice was steady. Thank you, Mr. Eugenio. Mario is a wonderful child. He just needs. She hesitated a moment, choosing her words. He just needs to feel loved. We all need that, I think. Eugenio nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Before he could say anything else, Irene entered the kitchen, her face tightening when she saw them together. Ignoring Kelsey's presence, she addressed Eugenio with a tone calculated to be pleasant, but edged with thinly veiled resentment. Eugenio, may I speak with you in private? She asked, fixing her gaze on him. Eugenio nodded, and the two walked to the library, leaving Kelsey alone in the kitchen. Irene closed the door behind them and looked at him with an expression that blended distrust and contempt. What are you doing? She asked in an icy whisper. Why are you acting as if that girl is someone important here? Eugenio looked at her, trying to stay calm. It's not about being important or not, Irene. It's about being a good person who is helping Mario. Something that, honestly, you should be doing yourself. His words made Irene take a step back, though her expression showed not surprise, but contained fury. So now I'm the bad mother? Of course, because I'm the one wasting my time on a child's nonsense. While you sit back, watching everything from a distance with your cameras. Do you really think I hadn't noticed that? Eugenio felt the tension in the air become almost tangible. He had never imagined Irene would notice the cameras, and the fact that she mentioned them in that way revealed a calculated awareness that now disturbed him deeply. The cameras are here for a reason, Irene. Because without them, I would never have seen how you treat Mario and our staff. I can't ignore what I've seen. Irene looked at him with a sarcastic smile. Seen? Do you really think a few cameras can show the truth? Do you know how much I hate this life? Do you know how much I've sacrificed just so you can maintain this image of a perfect family? The intensity in her voice wasn't anger, it was resentment, and Eugenio felt as if, for the first time, he was seeing Irene's true face. He stood there in silence, absorbing the bitterness she had kept hidden inside. Something inside him started to break, as if he finally understood that, to Irene, he, Mario, and the house itself were only parts of a life she despised. That same night, after a tense dinner, Eugenio decided to take a moment to himself and review the recordings in his study. He wanted to ensure he had made the right decision in installing those cameras, that he wasn't losing perspective. That's when he stumbled upon a scene that left him frozen. In the video, Irene was in the living room, and Mario approached her timidly, holding a small drawing he had made. His voice, almost a whisper, revealed the desperate need for acceptance he sought. Mom, I made this for you. Do you like it? Irene didn't even lift her eyes from her magazine. Without looking at him, she coldly replied, I don't like drawings, Mario. Don't waste your time on useless things. Mario remained motionless, and the camera captured the expression of pain on his face, a pain so deep that even the silence in the room seemed to echo with it. The child turned away, still holding the drawing, and left the room without a word. Seeing that, Eugenio felt a growing fury. It was as if something inside him, something that had remained dormant for years, was beginning to awaken. He decided he could no longer tolerate this situation. His own son was being hurt in his own home, and he had been a passive spectator for far too long. The next day, Eugenio sought out Kelsey and asked her to meet him in the library. She arrived shortly after, a look of uncertainty on her face. Eugenio invited her to sit, and after a moment of silence, he spoke to her. Kelsey, I know this is unusual, but I need your help. You've seen what's happening here. You know how Irene treats Mario, and I can't keep allowing this. He doesn't deserve to live in such a hostile environment. Kelsey, surprised by Eugenio's sincerity, nodded slowly. Mario needs to feel that he's important, that he has worth, that's something his own mother can't give him. Her voice trembled slightly, and Eugenio noticed the empathy in her eyes. Mr. Eugenio, I'll do everything I can to help, but you're the one who has to protect him. You have to make the decision to change things for him. Eugenio knew Kelsey was right. For years, he had been blind to the toxic dynamics that had taken root in his own home. He had allowed Irene's contempt to spread, infecting even his son's spirit. The urgency to act grew stronger with each passing minute. Later, after that conversation, Eugenio confronted Irene in her room. He looked her directly in the eyes, feeling the weight of all his repressed emotions finally rising to the surface. "Irene, this has to stop. If you can't be a mother to Mario, then I'll have to take action. I no longer care what you think about this house, me, or Mario. His voice trembled for a moment. This is over if you keep destroying our son's life." Irene looked at him without a trace of remorse. "Do you really think I care?" She replied with a contemptuous tone. "Do whatever you want, Eugenio. But I won't change, and I won't pretend to care about something I never felt." Eugenio left the room, feeling that the last hope was fading. Irene had made it clear she would not change, and he knew that the only way to protect Mario was to remove him from the darkness his own mother represented. With Kelsey by his son's side, Eugenio felt renewed strength. As he left the mansion at dawn, Eugenio realized he was on the threshold of a new life, one where Irene no longer had a place, and where Mario would have the chance to grow up in a home filled with love and respect. In the following weeks, the dynamic in the mansion began to transform. Mario, who had until then felt like a stranger in his own home, found in Kelsey the affection and understanding he so needed. The young maid, with her infinite patience and kindness, became an essential figure for the boy, providing him with a comfort Irene had never given. Eugenio, watching the bond between Mario and Kelsey grow stronger, felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness. He saw the peace that Kelsey's presence brought his son, and although it comforted him, it also filled him with bitterness, realizing that Irene, Mario's mother, had never been able to give him that love. Every night, he reviewed the recordings, and in each scene where Kelsey comforted Mario or made him smile, his resolve to change things grew firmer. One afternoon, Irene stormed into Mario's room while he and Kelsey were playing on the floor. Upon seeing their closeness, her expression turned cold, and her voice was sharp as a knife. "Mario, what are you doing here, wasting time?" Irene asked, not hiding her displeasure. Mario looked at his mother, frightened, but Kelsey stepped forward and spoke with a calmness that masked a great firmness. "Mrs. Irene, Mario finished his tasks, and we were just playing for a bit." Irene's gaze turned icy. "Since when do you decide what's best for my son?" Kelsey looked at her directly, undaunted. "All I do is offer him a moment of happiness, ma'am. Mario is just a child. He deserves to feel loved." Irene let out a bitter laugh, looking at her with disdain. "Make no mistake, Kelsey. You're nobody here. Don't confuse your role. You're nothing more than a simple employee." Eugenio, watching the scene from the recordings, felt fury boiling inside him. Eugenio knew he could no longer allow Irene to destroy the peace of his home. Mario and Kelsey deserved to live without fear, and he was willing to do whatever it took to protect them. That night, as the house slept, Eugenio remained in his study, reviewing the recordings again, as if drawing strength from each scene where Kelsey comforted his son or made him laugh. He knew he had to make a decision, one that would change everyone's lives. The next morning, Eugenio sat with Kelsey in the library. He had noticed that she, too, was beginning to show signs of exhaustion from the constant tension in the house. "Kelsey, I know this situation isn't easy for you," he said, with a warm and honest tone. "I don't want you to feel you have to put up with this, but I want you to know how much I appreciate what you've done for Mario." Kelsey looked at him, visibly moved. "Mr. Eugenio, I've also grown very fond of Mario. He's such a sweet boy, and I can't stand seeing him sad." Eugenio, touched by her words, felt that his decision was the right one. That very night, he summoned his courage and confronted Irene in the living room. The room's lights cast shadows on Irene's face, giving her a cold and remorseless expression. "Irene, I can no longer allow you to destroy our son," Eugenio said, with a firm voice. "This has gone too far." Irene looked at him with a mix of disbelief and contempt. "Do you really think you can do something about it? I'm Mario's mother. Eugenio took a deep breath, undeterred. You're his mother, but you don't act like one. I have no other choice. I want a divorce, and I will do whatever it takes to protect Mario from your contempt. Irene stayed silent for a few seconds, then, with a disdainful smile, agreed. Do whatever you want, Eugenio. This house has always felt like a prison to me. Now it will be for you as well. The decision to divorce Irene brought with it a series of inevitable changes. Irene left the house without trying to hide her relief, leaving Eugenio, Mario, and Kelsey in a kind of strange calm, as if a storm had ended. Mario, at first, seemed confused and sad, but over time, he began to adjust to the new life without his mother's constant presence. Eugenio and Kelsey, in turn, slowly rebuilt Mario's emotional stability. The three of them began to spend more time together, creating a routine in which affection and understanding were the foundations. Eugenio observed how Mario regained his joy and saw that Kelsey's presence was vital to that process. With each passing day, he felt a deeper connection with her, a gratitude and respect that gradually transformed into something more. One evening, as the three of them shared a quiet dinner in the dining room, Mario, unaware of the impact of his words, asked, Dad, will Kelsey always stay with us? Eugenio and Kelsey exchanged glances, surprised, but Eugenio responded with a smile. That depends on Kelsey, but I think we would all like it to be that way. Kelsey, moved, nodded and smiled at Mario. I will always be here for you, Mario. With Irene out of their lives, the atmosphere in the mansion changed completely. Mario blossomed, enjoying the freedom to express his emotions and to receive affection from his father and Kelsey. Eugenio began to spend more time with him, teaching him about the world and sharing moments he once thought lost. Each day, their bond grew stronger, and Eugenio realized that Mario was the center of his life. Meanwhile, the bond between Eugenio and Kelsey also grew in a way neither of them had anticipated. Shared glances, comfortable silences, long conversations by moonlight, all indicated that their relationship had ceased to be purely professional. One night, Eugenio found the courage to open up to her. Kelsey, I can't express how much everything you've done means to me. Mario and I have found in you something we didn't know we needed. Kelsey looked at him, her eyes shining with restrained emotion. Eugenio, I also found something here I didn't expect, a family, a reason to fight for. And I want to stay. I want to be a part of this. Her words hung in the air, sealing a tacit promise between them. Months later, the mansion was unrecognizable. The oppressive coldness that had characterized Eugenio and Mario's life had disappeared, replaced by a warm and loving atmosphere. Kelsey, who had transformed both of their lives, had become an essential figure in their lives. Eugenio, in turn, had been reborn. He was no longer the distant, resigned man he once was. Mario, now happier and more confident, spent his days surrounded by love and care. Kelsey's presence had given him a reason to smile and a mother figure he had never had. Finally, Eugenio, determined to formalize their relationship, proposed to Kelsey, and she accepted with tears of happiness. The wedding day was a moment of celebration, a day when, for the first time in years, the mansion was filled with laughter and life. Mario, thrilled, gave Kelsey a small drawing he had made for her, and Kelsey hugged him, promising that she would always be by his side. Over time, Eugenio and Kelsey were able to open a school for underprivileged children, fulfilling the dream she had always had. Mario also began to participate in the school's activities, helping other children and showing the generous heart he had developed thanks to the love Kelsey had given him. The story concludes with an image of the family enjoying a peaceful afternoon in the garden, united by the love and gratitude of having found each other. Eugenio, looking at Kelsey and Mario, reflects on the importance of valuing those around us and never taking for granted the love that transforms us. In the darkest corners, sometimes the purest light is found, one that illuminates and heals even the deepest wounds. And so, the renewed family began a new chapter, a chapter in which love, empathy, and the value of true family became the foundation of a renewed life filled with hope. What did you think of this story? Tell us in the comments. What would you do in a similar situation? We invite you to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends or family as a sign of support. It motivates us to keep uploading moving stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We value having you here with us. Click on the links appearing on your screen now. We have an exclusive selection of captivating stories and guaranteed entertainment just for you. See you in the next video.